2025. I rode 126 roller coasters, 114 of those being new credits, for a total of exactly 300 times, covering 197 miles of roller coaster track. Yeah. I need it! Today I'm going to be ranking a select 25, from 400-foot towers to tiny hidden gems. I really like all of these rides, including some honorable mentions that didn't make the cut, and it is very hard to choose some over others, because I like them all for very different reasons, as each ride has something special of its own to offer. But this ranking is a combination of two main factors. One, how much I enjoyed each ride, and two, how much they impressed me. For there is a difference between what I would call my purely favorite coaster and the best coaster I've ever been on. Now, I wouldn't want to rank just my favorite coasters, because that would literally just be me raving about Diamondback and Siren's Curse for 30 minutes. But my enjoyment of the coasters is definitely a huge factor when it comes to ranking, so I've tried to take both aspects into account. And let me just say, this list is very different from my last one. Starting off this list is Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind at Epcot. This absolute fun-packed, next-generation Disney roller coaster is one of the most technologically advanced, as well as my favorite of the Walt Disney World collection. At a whopping $500 million, it holds the current record for the most expensive roller coaster ever built, magically squeezing 5,577 feet of track into one building. It is also the fastest Disney roller coaster, with a 60-mile-per-hour backwards launch. The controlled spinning technology, combined with the screens, makes it the perfect indoor roller coaster. That being said, the ride isn't very intense and does have a lot of mid-course brake runs, which is not something I as a coaster enthusiast value. Nevertheless, I highly recommend this roller coaster to your average park goer. It's a blast like no other. A very different Orlando coaster, at the number 24 spot, is Manta at SeaWorld Orlando. Manta is a B&M flying coaster where you are suspended from the track with your belly facing downward, and it is easily the best ride at SeaWorld Orlando, although I completely understand anyone who prefers Mako's floater airtime. I love how the queue features real mantas in it, an aquarium in a roller coaster line. This theme really sets it apart from any other coaster. You start off with a curved drop to the left into one of my favorite inversions of all time, the pretzel loop. This nosedive onto your back pulls extremely intense G-forces, and I cannot get enough of it. After the pretzel loop, the rest of the ride is pretty tame with some slow rolls and turns, along with some great near misses with the rock work. I've even gotten wet on some rides from getting so close to the waterfall. In addition to the ride itself being incredible, as a personal preference, it is one of my all-time favorites. I've never had a dull ride on Manta, yet it is one of my most ridden coasters. Let's head on over to Virginia, however, to the first RMC to make this list. At the number 23 spot, I have Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion. Twisted Timbers is a hybrid conversion of the park's old wooden coaster named Hurler. It has a cool, rustic, old spooky farm theme, and as a whole delivers some fantastic ejector airtime. The ride starts with a slow barrel down drop into a high-speed turn and a ton of classic airtime hills. There is also a good mix of laterals and some decent, but somewhat weak rolls. While it is a smaller scale RMC, the way these airtime hills are profiled really focuses on sustained ejector rather than aggressive ejector. This ride gets a ton of love from sustained ejector lovers, but I personally do not enjoy it as much, and I do not think it is elite. It is a fantastic ride nevertheless, but still not my favorite coaster in Virginia. That goes to the first Intamin roller coaster to make this list. Pantheon is a next-generation Intamin multi-launch coaster. We pass over a switch track and over some magnetic LSM boosters to halfway climb what's called a top hat and fall backwards, rolling and gaining speed all the while into a large vertical spike. Although this ride is not well themed, the signage is basically the only theme, the track color and the trains look great. This ride's airtime is much more floater-based than the sustained ejector of Twisted Timbers, but I still love the way it flows through each element with such speed. It is an exhilarating experience. I also love the hang time you get on that first roll, and the jolting pops of ejector over the swing launch are always fun. 21 might be controversial, but a great ride nevertheless. Orion stands 287 feet tall with a 300-foot drop, and sparked the classic debate of whether it is a Giga coaster or not. Regardless, it definitely behaves more like a hyper than the traditional Giga. You start with a large drop, the strongest B&M has ever made in my opinion, into a slow and graceful wave turn, and into a likewise slow and graceful turnaround like that of a B&M hyper. The speed hill following though is excellent, and definitely my favorite moment of the whole ride. After that, you go into a traditional airtime hill and a turnaround with some decent forces in the front row. And finally, a small but violent wave turn into the brakes. The ride is definitely not very good as a Giga, but I still prefer it to many hypers. Not the next hyper though. That goes to Mako at SeaWorld Orlando. Mako is an upper tier B&M hyper for sure. Standing 200 feet tall, it delivers an Orion Strike drop into a Stengel dive, and then into some excellently profiled airtime hills, delivering up to 5-second floater airtime. If there is a B&M hyper in the world of the forums, Mako is definitely closest to that. And it still rides like it's fairly new, despite being 9 years old. And with the 4 across seating plus fast operations, Mako always keeps the wait times low, so you can re-ride this thing over and over again. Now after the mid-course, Mako does slow down a bit with the curving turns of the lake, that are nice, although not intense. Speaking of not intense, let's go to Cedar Point for my number 19, Millennium Force. Millennium Force was the first roller coaster to break the 300-foot threshold. It is my favorite of the Ohio Giga coasters because of its emphasis on speed. Although I value airtime much, Orion does not have enough good airtime moments for me to prefer it. Whereas what Millennium Force does, it does very well, emphasizing its speed. You rush through tunnels and past trees, giving it an unmatched sense of that speed. Despite that speed, Millie also runs very smooth for its age. You start with a 300-foot drop into a massive overbank that is actually a fairly intense moment. You then fly into a tunnel, and then into a large airtime hill, giving weak, albeit sustained, floater airtime. You do some more overbanks and fly into a similar airtime hill tunnel combo, and then a small pop of airtime, which is easily the strongest towards the end of the ride. Overall, Millie is still a wonderful classic that it has always been, despite bigger and better rides that have come. There is another classic Intamin, however, that I prefer just slightly. Stormrunner at Hershey Park in Pennsylvania is the only Intamin accelerator that I have had the opportunity to ride. Utilizing hydraulic pressure rather than magnetic propulsion, the launch packs an incredible acceleration, going from a theoretical 0 to 72 miles per hour in 2 seconds. Stormrunner's launch is undoubtedly the best I have ever experienced, but the ride isn't over from there. You crest a wacky-shaped top hat, and into a weirdly shaped inversion, mole snake loop, and then into a flying snake dive, which tosses you out of your seat. In contrast to Millennium Force, it is a short ride, but man, it packs quite the punch. Enough about Intamin roller coasters, though. Let's return to Florida for one of my favorite coasters by Bolliger and Mabillard. Montu opened in 1996 as the second B&M in the park after Kumba, and it is, in my humble opinion, the finest work to come from B&M to this day. See, most old B&Ms have a decent to severe rattle, but Montu rides silky smooth while pulling great positive G-forces. It's everything I love about the feeling of an invert. Montu balances whip with intense inversions and size with speed. The tunnels and trenches are also fantastic. On this ride, you slowly crest into a curved drop to the left, flying through 7 fantastic inversions, including vertical loops, the world's first Immelman, a 0G roll, a batwing, and of course that insanely fast corkscrew in the final trench before the brake run. Montu is not my favorite coaster to come from B&M, but it might as well be the best, and it will always have a special place in my heart. Let's head back to Mason, Ohio, however. At my number 17 spot is Mystic Timbers at Kings Island. Mystic Timbers is a wooden roller coaster by Great Coasters International, and is, for sure, a world-class wooden coaster. It takes you down a convoluted and wild drop to the left, delivering crazy lateral forces, before taking you through the forest in a layout that will toss you side to side and up and down. It can feel pretty out of control, and that's just what I like about it. The airtime is nothing too crazy in my opinion, but its sense of speed is well done. It also rides very smooth for a wooden coaster. Speaking of coasters that fly through the forest, another Intamin multi-launch coaster to make this list, Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure, is an excellent blend of outdoor thematics and modern roller coaster technology. With 7 launches, it boasts the most of any coaster, and it also packs a near 3-minute ride time. It may be a family thrill coaster, but man, is it one awesome family thrill coaster. This ride makes me smile every time. It's exhilarating and will surprise you with certain elements I will not name for the sake of spoilers. There is another wooden roller coaster though, and a drastically different one from Mystic Timbers that I do in fact prefer. At the number 16 spot is Phoenix at Knoebels. Phoenix is a small and rather obscure coaster, aside from the fact that it is voted the best wooden coaster by the Golden Ticket Awards every year. Phoenix stands a tiny 78 feet tall and features a very simple but foolproof layout, starting with the pitch black tunnel, climbing the lift, dropping into a slow elevated turnaround, and proceeding through a bunch of airtime. What makes this ride is the buzz bar restraints. Traditional lap bars ratchet and have a variety of positions. The buzz bar, however, only locks in one position, parallel to your thighs. You have a lot, and I mean a lot, of room. The result is that those tiny little airtime hills that would seem to do nothing otherwise send you literally flying out of your seat, giving you the fabled standing airtime, where nothing but your ankles clutching to the seat backing in front of you is touching the train. Other times, your thighs will just slam straight into the buzz bar. It is genuinely the most scared I have been on a coaster, making this my 3rd favorite roller coaster of all time. It is room at its finest. The coaster itself is also very smooth for its age and well maintained, and the dispatches are 30 seconds because the buzz bars are so easy to check and there are no seat belts. This ride is not intense at all, making it the ultimate re-rideable airtime fun machine. Let's return to Hershey Park, however, for an Intamin classic. Skyrush is a unique Intamin Hyper Wing coaster. It starts off with an incredibly fast cable lift, swiftly crossing over one of my favorite drops. You bank sharply to the right into some absolutely crushing positive forces. Following this is an ejector airtime hill, another bank, and another ejector airtime hill. This is the 2nd most intense coaster I have experienced in my opinion. The positives are excellent, and the ejector is definitely some of the most powerful I've experienced. The restraints do push down into your thighs, but it could be worse. The ride also likes to break down a lot, and it takes the right conditions for it to run well. It also has a pretty bad rattle. Despite these cons, the back row in the left wing seat is a totally different experience. Combined with a hot day, and Skyrush is an insanely elite creation in my opinion. The most intense coaster I've ever been on, however, is not Skyrush, but its New Jersey neighbor El Toro. El Toro is an Intamin prefabricated wooden roller coaster, which basically means it was put together like a steel coaster and not carved on site. Fun fact, it was actually assembled by RMC. Now El Toro has the strongest drop in airtime I've ever experienced. No question about it. The first 2 ejector hills absolutely knock the wind out of me. The level of airtime on this thing really is absurd. The valleys are also pretty rough, as of now, but it gives it a gnarly feel. And the Rolling Thunder Hill is also the most legendary airtime hill ever. Changed my mind. Now, El Toro's intense, but it's not non-stop action per se, and overall, it's really not my thing. But if you like just straight rip-your-face airtime, this is the ride for you. Let's go to a very different coaster though. Just barely missing the top 10 is Siren's Curse at Cedar Point. Siren's Curse is a glass-smooth, new-gen Vekoma tilt coaster, and wow, it's incredible. My favorite part of the ride is actually the lift hill. The onboard audio that they play makes you feel like you are really high up and at sea. The view you get from the top is incredible too, and you can actually see the Cedar Point seagulls flying around. It made my palms feel sweaty, something I've never really felt on a roller coaster. Then the tilt track does its thing, and that's when the uneasy feeling really amplifies. While the drop doesn't do anything in the front, it is excellent in the back. It was the first time I felt the stomach dropping feeling in a very long time. As for the layout itself, you get a ton of next generation twists and rolls with some heavy metal music going. Night Ride on this is absolutely insane too, with the train's lighting package. This is actually my favorite roller coaster of all time, but I realized that the theming really carries it. If it had just been a goofy Harley Quinn coaster sent to Mexico, it probably wouldn't even have made this list, and that's why I dropped it to number 11. Let's go back yet again to Kings Island for my favorite roller coaster at the park. Starting off the top 10 is Diamondback at Kings Island, my second favorite roller coaster of all time. Let me start off by saying people are crazy and don't know what they are talking about. Granted, I did ride this on a hot day in August, and I also had a ridiculous amount of room, but still. The airtime on this thing is unlike any B&M I've been on, period. People rave about Mako's 5-second floater and Fury's last 3 camelbacks as being the best airtime to come from B&M. Let me just say, it's not even close. Diamondback's profiling is about as elite as it gets. Don't come expecting Mako, however, as the airtime is not sustained. Rather, each hill is a progression of airtime. If you sit in the front, it starts off as ejector and transitions to Mako level floater. If you sit in the back, though, it starts as that floater, and then you get yanked over the drop. For some reason, it is nothing like Thunderstriker at Carowinds, which I rode just 2 weeks before. I cannot get stapled on this thing, too. The amount of room the operators will give you feels like it should be illegal. The only coaster that gave me that feeling was Phoenix. Now imagine if it was a Steel Hyper. That is why Diamondback is by far my favorite coaster from B&M. Now, it does have a rattle, and no, it's not theming, but it's not bad enough to impact the re-rideability. Most of that shake you feel on the floor and not in your seat, shaking your head around. Nevertheless, it's not the best B&M. That definitely goes to Fury 325 at Carowinds. Fury 325 is my most ridden coaster, and the coaster that got me into coasters. It is a B&M Giga coaster located on the border of North and South Carolina. You climb a high-speed chain lift into a massive drop that feels like it lasts forever. It is not as strong as Orion's drop, but it is way longer because of the way it was profiled. The ride flings you through high-speed turns across the park entrance, giving quality Flowjector airtime. You might even get solid ejector if you sit in the back rows. This takes you to the iconic treble clef turnaround, named for its resemblance to the music sign at a certain angle. It is by far the best turnaround ever created by B&M. You rise up with some good positives into a sideways drop, which dives under a bridge. There is a bit of rattle at this part, but it's merely noticeable. The rest of the ride runs like butter. After the treble clef, you take a slow turn into 3 fantastic ejector airtime hills. Now overall, this ride is a good balance of airtime and a sense of speed, a compromise between Orion and Millennium Force. Orion has some stronger airtime moments like the speed hill, and Millie's sense of speed is unmatched, but Fury does both airtime and speed well. Now Fury is by no means a forceless ride, but not very forceful compared to some other rides on this list, otherwise it would rank higher for me. It has some dead spots, and I personally get bored after about 5 rides or so and move on to a different section of the park, whereas I can't say that about some other rides on this list. Like the next coaster, Maverick at Cedar Point. It may be an old coaster, opening all the way back in 2007, but man, does it still hold up as one of the best launch coasters. Maverick is the original Intamin multi-launch coaster, and let me start off by saying that it has the best pacing of any coaster I've ever been on. I honestly don't blame anyone who ranks this over Steel Vengeance. The ride starts off with a launch lift, cresting over an incredibly violent drop measuring 95 degrees. You swing immediately to the right and into some extremely fast turns, delivering neat pops of airtime. You then rise into one of the best ejector airtime hills I've ever experienced, and then into a more graceful horseshoe roll. After this, the ride flings you into a tunnel and slows down. From almost a standstill, you are catapulted down the launch track up to the top speed of 70 miles per hour, and this is my favorite launch on any coaster. The acceleration it packs is, first of all, rivaled by few when it comes to LSM launch coasters. Second, I love the way it flows from that pause you get slowing down at the beginning to the absolute insanity, which is the boom. After this, you are flung outside once again and finish the ride with some insanely whippy Stengel dives and one more airtime hill. Maverick is objectively the best launch coaster at Cedar Point, but it's not my favorite launch coaster there. I'm going to give this to Top Thrill 2 because it is just so ridiculously insane. I know this has gotten a lot of hate since the 2024 shenanigan, but for what it is, at the number 7 spot I have Top Thrill 2 at Cedar Point. Top Thrill 2 is a reimagining of the old Top Thrill Dragster, which was powered by the old hydraulic launch systems. That launch has since been replaced with a magnetic swing launch, taking you halfway up the 400-foot top hat, and back down into an insane backwards launch, reaching speeds of up to 101 miles per hour and into a spike that stands 420 feet tall. As for the train, you probably only ascend 300 something feet or so up this, which is still insane, and a must ride in the back row. This is probably the most sustained moment of airtime on any coaster. It's not extremely powerful, but man, you are falling forever. The view from the top is absolutely mental as well. You plummet down the spike past an insane head chopper and dive down the launch track one last time to ascend the massive top hat. It varies how fast it crests this, but when I rode it, the top hat delivered some pretty violent ejector at the top. The drop-off following is so intense I can't scream, and the Heartline roll delivers absurd laterals. Night rides on this thing are somehow even more insane. The problem is that this ride likes to break down a lot, so good luck getting on it. I recommend going first thing at opening. Let's take a break from Cedar Point though, and head to an interesting park in Atlanta. Air Force One is a 2023 RMC designed by Joe Draves, and it is intense. Every second of this ride is a powerhouse. It is the complete opposite of a dead spot. It takes a majority of RMC's best elements, fine-tunes them to perfection, and then smashes them up into an absolutely wild mess. I do prefer Maverick's pacing because it's more dynamic, but as far as non-stop action goes, Air Force One definitely takes the cake. You crest a decent drop into what is called the Raven Trust Dive, which fakes you out and it has some hardy whip to it. You then sling over a speed hill, delivering solid laterals, and into my favorite Zero-G stall. It has everything that I like about Zero-G stalls, hang time, and a whippy entry and exit. Especially in the back row, this stall will try to eject you. But the ride just keeps getting more insane because you launch into what is probably the strongest outer bank on any RMC, and for sure my favorite outer bank. Then if you thought it couldn't get any more insane, you race into a double up, which delivers arguably the most powerful ejector airtime I've ever experienced. The drop off the double up into the arcade roll is up there with Magnum and El Toro, and I haven't even gotten to the finale yet. The arcade roll is one of the best inversions, flinging you upside down into a weird outer bank, and a surprisingly intense bank turn that makes me gray out every time. RMCs usually don't pull a lot of positives, but this one seems to. Following, you take another roll into the most ridiculous quad down ever constructed. I don't blame anyone who has this at their number one spot, but it's a little too much airtime, and I personally prefer more dynamic rides than ones that simply try to rip your face off. Not my favorite RMC from Joe Draves though, because the first coaster to make my top 5 is Wildcats Revenge at Hershey Park. What I love about Wildcats Revenge is that it takes the aggression of Air Force One in a versatile layout, yet it is not intense at all compared to Air Force One, making it exciting yet re-rideable. Wildcats Revenge is, in my opinion, miles ahead of Twisted Timbers. While the airtime is not as sustained, it is way stronger and more exciting. Even the inversions give strong ejector. At first I wasn't very impressed, but the more I rode this thing, the more I realized just how fun this ride can be. The pre-lift is very wacky and gives great airtime, especially if you have some room, which you can actually get a lot of unlike Skyrush. The wave turns deliver the likes of Iron Gwazi, the stall is mild but whippy, and the 2 rolls at the end are probably the best profiled rolls to ever exist. The finale following, unlike Air Force One, manages to combine insane ejector with sporadic and sudden movements and laterals. It is not as impressive as a ride like Steel Vengeance, but it's so much fun. It will always be one of my favorite RMCs, and managed to hold a strong number 1 on my list for some time. Speaking of Steel Vengeance, let's go back to Cedar Point. Steel Vengeance was the original Hyper Hybrid, opening in 2018. It stands 205 feet tall, and is still the longest RMC in the world, clocking an astounding 5,740 feet of track. While every single element that Steel Vengeance does, Air Force One and Wildcats Revenge do better, Steel Vengeance is just so mind-blowing due to its size, duration, and the view from the top of Lake Erie. There's no experience like seeing the entirety of Cedar Point to your right and endless water to your left. The experience is completely surreal, and is unlike any coaster I've ever been on, so that's why I rank it so highly, although it is nowhere near as fun as some other coasters. The first half of this ride takes you over some very large and drawn-out elements, giving sustained ejector airtime. It feels like a strong hypercoaster. Then after the mid-course, however, the ride starts to feel like Twisted Timbers. Now once again, I personally don't like the way that the airtime hills are profiled, especially considering Steel Vengeance's emphasis on quantity. While it is incredibly impressive that they managed to fit all of these airtime hills in the space that they had to work with, the airtime is very drawn out and sustained as a result, and it starts to feel more like a jackhammer that gave me a headache by the end because it is so much ejector airtime, yet not as exciting as an aggressive speed machine. The rolls are also decent, but nothing compared to the likes of Wildcat and Air Force. From this point on, any one of these coasters could be my number one, so let's list some honorable mentions. Afterburn at Carowinds I felt was airtime whippy and smooth, but just not as impressive compared to some other rides on this list. Banshee at Kings Island had a little too much of a rattle for me to really value its focus on sustained positive valleys. The vest restraints also hurt. Meanwhile, Alpengeist at Busch Gardens Williamsburg is a very solid invert and is one of the most intense roller coasters I've ever been on. The mid-course hits so hard though, it puts Skyrush laterals to shame, and the second half following is pretty lackluster. Candemonium is a great B&M hyper, but the airtime is significantly weaker than other B&M hypers. Airtime being the focus of B&M hypers, there is not much else to its smooth, graceful ride other than the aesthetic it adds to the park. And Nitro is also a very good hyper, but it really needs a repaint, and the Helix is just not my thing, as it takes away the re-rideability, which is the main thing I value in B&M hypers. But back to our list. Velocicoaster. This ride has gotten some hate over the years, and I've heard a lot of people say that it's just a launch coaster. But that's like saying Hagrid's is just a launch coaster. What is just a launch coaster is Pantheon, but Velocicoaster is no Pantheon. If you haven't heard, Velocicoaster is not just a coaster, but an immersive experience. Honestly, it has one of my favorite queues and stations. I love the modern industrial aesthetic, and don't even get me started on the trains. The Raptor paddock is also very impressive. The fact that they managed to squeeze that much track in there and keep the ride somewhat exciting just blows my mind. It's not forceless either, even if you want 100% intensity. You do get some really good hang time and whip through those inversions at the start, depending on where you sit, and also on that one airtime pop in the middle. But before you know it, you are slung into the second launch, and up arguably my favorite top hat. For the suspense that builds up with the launch to the top hat, and then the following climax with the 0G stall is unmatched. Even though each element itself isn't the best, the sequencing of each element just flows so perfectly into the next. It feels more like a story than a coaster. It starts out with an introduction, has a rising action, a climax, and then a finale. Although I've heard it has a rattle, and I don't remember the forces all too well, for now it stands at number 3 for its pacing and unique inversions. I generally prefer these unique inversions to airtime. The answer seemed clear. But still, I went back and forth between this and Stardust Racers at Epic Universe. When I first heard about this coaster, I was honestly very disappointed that Universal's next coaster was coming from Mack and not Intamin. I also thought the theme was very pathetic, which by no means is the theme that good. But what caught me off guard is just how intense this ride is. I personally think that this is the most intense coaster in Florida for its back-to-back rip-your-face-off ejector and then heavy positives. To the delight of us coaster enthusiasts, Universal did not hold back with this ride. Stardust Racers starts off with a decent launch, but if you don't know already, there's 2 parts to it, and the second part is probably more forceful than Velocicoaster's second launch. It may be brief, but the closest thing I can compare it to is that second launch on Maverick, only much shorter, because soon enough you are flying into a top hat. This top hat and turnaround are honestly slow and pretty forgettable. But after that, you fly into a series of airtime hills, giving RMC level ejector, only to immediately be thrusted back down into your seat, delivering heavy positives. It does this over and over again until you hit that second launch and fly into the Celestial Spin, one of the coolest dueling elements ever created. The barrel downdrop on yellow side absolutely yanks you like a ragdoll, whereas the roll upwards on green side gives you a great view of the yellow train. After the Celestial Spin, you fly into some surprisingly intense turns and get some great near misses with the supports. The main one in particular, in my opinion, gives better lateral forces than Skyrush. Following, you have a few more airtime hills, dancing over each other into the brake run. Unfortunately, Stardust Racers does already have a rattle, and a decent one which does bother me, unlike Diamondback, considering you pull positives and heavy positives that many times. I'd imagine this would probably decrease in my rankings in a few years. But for now, it holds pretty strong here. If you're still watching, consider subscribing to support my fun little channel. But nevertheless, my number one coaster of all time is Skull Mountain at Six Flags Great Adventure, which was just an incredibly intense and breathtakingly immersive experience. Okay, seriously, what in the world? Having experienced Stardust on the same day, I can confidently say that there is a clear winner for my number one coaster, and that goes to Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens, Tampa. Iron Gwazi has gotten some hate in recent years for being overrated, and I will admit that some days it simply just doesn't run well. I've gotten off this thinking it's not even top 5, but some days it feels like it is flying, especially at night when it's all warmed up, and when it is flying, this thing is peak. You start off with a swift 206-foot drop, fairly similar to Steel Vengeance's drop, except for that rapid turn at the bottom, which makes it feel way faster. It may not be as strong as El Toro or Skyrush's drop, but it is still my favorite, for the sense of speed that it gives. You fly into one of the weirdest shaped Outer Banks after this, that really focuses on strength and speed rather than sustained airtime, turning around to fly under all of the supports again. Next you slow down a little bit, building suspense for my absolute favorite inversion of all time, the Death Roll. The Death Roll basically combines everything I love about an inversion: insane lateral whip, insane ejector hang time, and a suspense leading up to it. After the Death Roll, you fly into a high-speed overbank, and then get whipped into, surprise, my favorite airtime moment of all time. The wave turn is definitely not the strongest moment of airtime, nor the most sustained, but what I love about the wave turn is, again, the way the ride flows into it. After this, you get a pretty good second wave turn similar to Wildcat's Revenge, before gliding into a decent stall. Nothing too crazy. The stall takes you into the Asian Camelback, which delivers shocking pops of ejector, before you turn around for one last big drop into the brakes. I used to think that was a dead spot, but it's not. Due to it, the actual airtime moments themselves are ridiculously powerful. Overall, this ride is not a powerhouse like Air Force One, El Toro, or even Wildcat's Revenge, but it's a good balance of everything that I love about the previous coasters on this list. Do you like a massive drop, whippy inversions, powerful airtime moments, non-stop action? Iron Gwazi has it all, and I've heard it described that each element has a presence, and I couldn't agree more. That is why Iron Gwazi is my number one coaster. In the same way that Twisted Timbers is Diet Steel Vengeance, Wildcat's Revenge is like a Diet Iron Gwazi. So Iron Gwazi adds the quantity and speed to aggression and layout. And those are my top 2 coasters. So yeah, I'm basic whatever. Those 2 coasters are low-key based. Subscribe.